give interviews, but so they treated it as such. Essentially, what they said is that DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. But that's actually like saying that Shakespeare is ink on paper.
Yeah.
Shakespeare is ink on paper, but it's actually more than that. And so if you want to reduce DNA to the chemical that it is, you can, but you're actually missing the interesting bit. The interesting bit is that it actually not only contains information, but functions as a text. And we haven't even begun understanding how it functions. So, I think that before taking any definitive positions, one would want to keep an open mind. And when you consider that it's only been 60 years, or a little bit under 60 years, that science knows about DNA. I think there's still a lot more to be discovered about how biology works. And I think a lot of the presuppositions that got us to molecular biology will need to be thought anew if one is going to move beyond and actually figure out what's going on.
How mighty do you think that DNA is? I mean, again, it's been suggested that that we as human beings and all other species on the planet are kind of slaves to our genes, if you will, that genes drive us, if you will. But in using that argumentation and what we've just talked about, could that be true in one sense? If that's the source of everything and the root of everything, that particular code, if you will, maybe it is having an experience through us, if you will. How do you view that, Jeremy?
Well, I can only really speak for myself rather than for my DNA molecules. But I have opinions about that. So first of all, just what is this DNA stuff and how powerful is it? I think it's true. It leads one to a deeper appreciation when one sees that DNA has been around on this planet for about 4 billion years. It has changed itself into a multifarious number of creatures. 99.99% of all the creatures that have already existed have already disappeared. But meanwhile, it's the only thing that has stayed the same. The surface of the planet has changed. All the plants, animals, everything has gone through huge transformation. But the one thing that has remained constant over the 4 billion years is the genetic code. So that's pretty strong. In other words, it's a very strong phenomenon. It can stay stable for 4 billion years while transforming itself into an enormous variety of creatures. So, and it can handle a planet as hot as a volcano. It can handle a planet as cold as ice. It can, go through all the transformations that have occurred here. It's a pretty strong phenomenon. And also, it wires the Earth under the waters, beneath the surface of the oceans, up into the stratosphere. The DNA cell-based life is all through this biosphere.
Yeah.
It's really wired itself deep into the Earth, and it's holding on really solidly. So I have big respect for that. And when you look at it from above and you think that our species is only 200,000 years old, I'm talking Homo sapiens sapiens, that's extremely short. What is it, 10,000 biological generations? It does seem that we do have our biology certainly gives us these drives. Just look at sex, for example. We're driven to sex. I don't want to presume this about all our listeners, but a good part of our listeners, and sex is this thing that enchants us and attracts us, and so much of our stuff revolves around it. But then actually when heterosexual sex occurs, and just at the moment of the ecstasy, is precisely when the genetic material is transmitted from the male to the female. And is life not pulling a fast one on us at that point? How come we're so driven to it that, and that just at the moment of, well, it's certainly the male ecstasy, it coincides with that.
Yeah.
Yes, it seems really clear that life has wired us for that.
Absolutely. And I want to discuss a little bit as well in terms of some of the visions and some of the things that you saw and that other people have seen and some of the classical motifs here as well, because if we go back to that idea that many common visions seems to incorporate the serpent in some way or another. Sometimes people talk with a big giant anaconda and get information from this and so forth.
Uh-huh.
So what's your view on that, and what do you think that is? Is that us?
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I took ayahuasca with an Ayaschanica practitioner, I didn't know what I was about to experience, and what actually happened after, I think, 10 or 15 minutes into the experience, after a few kaleidoscopic images, suddenly I found myself surrounded by these enormous fluorescent serpents that were like 15 yards long, 1 yard high, and they started explaining things to me in a kind of telepathic language that went right through my forehead. And the first message was, you are just a tiny human being, really small. And I could see, looking at them, that they were right. And I could also see that I had presuppositions about the world that were wrong and arrogant. For example, until then, I thought that what my eyes were showing me right then, these serpents, didn't exist. I presumed this was a whole level of reality that was just superstition. So this is actually for me, the encounter with enormous fluorescent serpents was a moment that challenged my, let's just say, categories. Of how one understands the world, of what is reality, because actually when you see these entities and they start explaining things to you about yourself that are profoundly true, you don't doubt their reality. They may not be the reality of an automobile standing in front of you, but I mean, they're even worse. They're like 100 times more intense. They're completely terrifying, and they make you feel extremely small and vulnerable. Much easier to stand next to an automobile than to be sitting in front of fluorescent serpents sitting in the dark in a jungle hut. And just what are these serpents? Well, if one gets back to the idea of a kind of biospheric DNA TV that one is tuning into, it would seem that serpents are some of the favorite presenters on that television channel.
Good point. So that means that to you then, are they part of although they are invisible to our realm, most of the time anyway. Are they out there? Are we entering into another world, or do you think that we are entering down into another level of consciousness? There's so many different ways of approaching this. What do you think?
Look at it this way: we're already filled with DNA.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's outside of us. It's actually all inside us. It's what is inside us. It's what is inside our own neurons. The kind of double snakiness of biology is in every cell. It's all the way down to the bank and back as far as we're concerned. So it's all around us, outside us in the biological life. It's all inside us. It's the whole thing. And life is biological, it's cellular, and it has this it stores its information in the double snake molecule, and it's a pretty snaky affair, the whole thing. And even if you just look at a human being, I mean, look at the intestines, or the whole digestive tube from mouth to anus looks like one big serpent.
Even the brain could be argued as a long snake.
That too.
This is one thing that I've been wondering about, and that's obviously a tricky question here in terms of the origins of this kind of knowledge and how it came to be that some of these people began to tap into this at all. I mean, we have these ideas that have been going about that someone way back accidentally, ate the wrong mushroom. That's one explanation here in one sense. But if we specifically talk about ayahuasca, then we have this knowledge of combining two different plants, one containing DMT, dimethyltryptamine, and then that second plant that